Good? Yeah? All right. All right, number one. Hello from America. If I try to say any other language, I'm going to ruin it. So maybe bonjour, but that's like about it. Like I don't want to like, it's what it is. So my very good friend who did this presentation with me could not be here. Could not travel with us. So he's here in spirit, and his name is Drew Tauber. He's at Drew CPU. So if you are going to Twitter anything while you're in this presentation, please find Drew and tweet at him too. So, but the topic is go with the flow. Uh-oh. Yeah, so I am Sandi Zellner. Would you mind going to the next slide? I'm Sandi over there on the left. That's a picture of Drew over here on the right. Drew and I have been the co-leaders of the New York City admin, user, now architecture groups. We kind of just do anything that needs to be done for New York City Trailblazer community, have been for about 8 years now, on and off. And he is a lead solution engineer at Clear. Clear is an identification verification company that I have to say could not travel through the airport without, in America, makes it 30 seconds, you're on the airplane. Perfect. So, and he very, very graciously did record audio on his slides later on in the presentation. So when you go back and watch this, his presentation is there. He's the coding side expert, and I am more of the config side expert. We work together, and the reason we have this topic really is because we saw that Salesforce is, they are going towards Flow as their number one, especially from a configuration perspective. Flow is your number one way to do it. We also have noticed that there's a big gap in the amount of understanding, experience levels, just background in how to use flows properly. And we wanted to make sure we talked about, you mind going to the next one, please? I'm going to skip that because who cares? OK, all right. So we're going to go, our assumptions here. Number one, you know what flow is? Good. In case you don't, all of these blue links are highlighted to Trailhead modules. You do have some experience with Flow Builder. You know how to make them accessible to your users, whether or not it's on a button, it's in Slack now, and you've built a flow or two. If not, go towards the links. Next one, please. All right. This is a picture of Drew's actual inbox.
Yeah.
Of all of the flow errors. Now, number one, yes, Salesforce gives you lovely information in your flow error messages, but one of the things that we wanted to talk about is really how to avoid the situation in the first place. So, you wouldn't mind going to the next one too? All right. The other thing is, your inbox might get all those lovely messages with the information, but if you run in a big team, maybe the last user that changed that flow is an integration user that your CDI or CI/CD system's hooked up to. Might not get that. Who's paying attention? And also, if your users end up trying to use a flow and they get these error messages, most of the time they have no idea what it means. They get frustrated. They can't do what they need to do. And there is no way when they submit a case or call on the phone and say, I have a problem, that they would have taken a picture of this so you have any clue of what happened when they ran into the error, right? So, next one, please. What we thought we would do is really kind of just highlight some of the main things that cause errors. I'm going to kind of, again, run quickly through this part, just really thinking more of errors can happen in flows. We should have a plan to deal with them. So here are some of the really common ways for a flow to have a problem. You've picked the wrong field in your flow. you're trying to configure which field do I want it to come to. There's a million trees. Maybe you're not quite familiar enough with your relationship tree to find the right field. So you get an error message. Maybe I chose the wrong variable in my field and it messes up. One of the most common ones, your user doesn't have access to the objects and or records and or fields that you're asking the flow to deal with. Too many SQL queries. Don't put any DML statements in your loops, but if you're an admin, you might not know that. Right? So null values. How many times you ask your flow to go look for something in the system so you can use it in your flow, it can't find something. You have a null value, it errors out. And unhandled exceptions, there's a bazillion and a half ways you could have one. So the big thing that we want to talk about and discuss here today is you should have a plan to deal with errors that happen with flows. Whether that is, make sure you tell the flow what to do if it can't find something in your get records component. What should it do? What should I do if I go try to add something to a collection and then my collection's empty? Okay, so not necessarily that we're trying to solve for every problem, that we're thinking about we need to make sure our flow can handle an error in the same way as if you were writing Apex code, your unit tests should have a positive and a negative looking for your test results, right? You have to have a plan for what happens when things go wrong. So one of the things I like to do, please, is first of all, you have to have the information to know what's going wrong. There is a place in the setup menu. You can go and look at all of your failed flow interviews. And if you click into one of those, would you mind? Thank you. Yep. Okay. If you click into your error messages, it will show you the route that it took that was wrong. Okay. Also, while you're building your flow, every time you're asking the system to take an action, you should have a fault path. Please have a fault path. If you are color coordinated, if you can see colors, the pink ones are usually the ones you have to really be careful of. And at the bottom here, it says add a fault path. That means if something goes wrong, what should the flow do? Okay. And there are many ways to do that. You could, if you have an error handling system, send a message to Jenkins, like send a message to Slack, send somebody an email. Do something that works for you. One thing that I've done is I've taken the idea of I'm going to make a subflow that handles my errors. For me, a lot of times that is, I'm just going to send myself an email, right? And again, you could do all of those other things. Pick the one that works for you and go with it. So the other things I like to do is not only that error handling subflow, but making sure the user, like if I'm in a screen flow, if there's required information that your user needs to make sure that they can save their record, if they haven't filled it in for a screen, don't let them go to the next one until they give you that piece of information, right? So some visibility filters, relevant error messages, that sort of thing when you're building your flow. Then test, and debug some more. Don't forget to debug as the users that will actually be using the flow. Don't just debug as an admin. Okay? All right. And make sure you have real-world sample data in your system. Either supply it inside your flow, or make sure there's some in your sandbox. By the way, oh, this is a special message from Drew. He will kill me if I don't send you this message. Do not, how does he say it? All right, in production, do not build a flow, number one. Do not build a flow in production, and do not change a flow in production. Use a sandbox. Please. All right, but that's a message especially from Drew all the way. He's still in New York City. Okay. All right, next one, please. All right. So here's just an example. It does play a video eventually. If you want to watch it, great. But here, basically, my flow is going to error out because I'm missing a piece of information that the flow needs. It's missing an email address. You can't send an email with a flow if the recipient doesn't have an email address, right? So I'm going to make sure that I have, that's why it failed, by the way. Next one. Oh, hopefully it works. Let's see what happens. Yeah, please. Thank you. It's only short. But basically right here, what I'm saying is, in your action, connect it to your whatever you want to do for your fault. I'm choosing my subflow. This is a subflow that I created. It is in the presentation. You put your information in. And you can add variables like, what is the name of my parent flow? What record is my parent flow doing? Are there any variables that are super important that I need to know about in my error message? Who do I want the error message to go to? So you can pass your variables from your parent to your subflow, and it's all makes life easier. So next one, please. Oh, that's some more connecting. I need to update these because they've now changed what this looks like. I just realized in winter 23 that it looks different. Sorry. So here I'm connecting my parent flow to my child flow, adding those variables. So then when I get my email, when something goes wrong, I know exactly what happened. What user was using the system? What record were they trying to do something on? I can make a message using, let's see, Aaron, was your session earlier about, no it wasn't, formulas. That was, thank you. Gosh darn it. Okay, all right, so, but you can create all kinds of formulas to make the messages relevant to you, so you know exactly what is going on without having to weed through your inbox. And again, you get the right message at the right time. The other way I like to look at this is I can make this active in my client's sandbox, right, or production org, and my team gets the email message that something's going wrong. Okay, thank you. All right. While we're looking at our failed interview, we want to check to make sure your users have access to what you're asking the flow to do. I have to say that's probably the #1 flow issue I see, especially with people that are new to flows, is you're building it as an admin, it works great. Do they have access to the records you're looking for? You might not know. You could put a check inside your flow to make sure a decision, if my user has access, do something. If my user does not have access, do something else. Right? Like we can plan for these things. So, yep, good. Thank you. There's a cute little subflow. It is not perfect. It's a starting point, but it isn't a package. There is a little Astro Rocks 23. That's my favorite number. If you'd like it, there are some instructions linked in there as well. Okay, here is Drew's part. Drew loves to code. He wants to be able to have, you can go to the next, did everyone got their picture? Okay, I'm not gonna play the message, but you can test your flows with Apex code. He has a bunch of code. It's the next couple slides that he will actually show you. Keep going, one more. It's probably forcing us to play. All right, he does make sure you have some data for your for your flows to test. Then he's saying, go and test that thing. It is a test, yay, yay, yay. Next one. He's gonna kill me when he sees the recording, and I went through this fast, but we're just not gonna tell him. Okay, shh, shh. Okay, next one too. So basically, you test it for one record, you test it for a lot of records, right? Again, these are all things that come from best practices from Apex code, but not necessarily people that have never coded before, right? So This one also, he's making sure that his flow is active before he tests it. When you move a flow from your sandbox, it's not active. So if you have these tests, your tests will fail because it's looking for an active flow. It's never going to find one. So make sure it's active that in the code there. Next one, please. And then this is the example of the piece of code for the whole thing. He would love it if you tried it out. Tweet it at him. He'll have so much fun. Tweet him suggestions to how to make it better. What? I love him. He's my, I love him, but we like to tease each other. Okay, next one. Oh, one more. He did this at the last minute for me because he knew he couldn't come. I'm pretty sure he thought I wasn't going to be able to explain the code well enough. That's okay, I don't mind. But here is the piece of code for a flow test if you'd like to have it. And then really, I'd like to spend the last few minutes really just talking to you about how do you approach error handling or thinking about error handling within your flows. So I think this is question time. Yes?
I love the part about flow testing. Because automation should be tested, even click automation.
Yes, it should.
I don't like this approach because it gives you hassle with deployments. So you need to deploy your flow first, then you need to activate it, then you need to deploy the Apex code.
Yes.
Because otherwise your tests will fail and then your deployment fails.
The test.
Hence, I would like to know if you tried the new thing, the visual tester for flow.
Oh, we skipped that one. There's a thing at the end there that said summer or winter. Wait, summer? Winter 23 put me out of a job. I did skip that one, but yes, you can do the visual one. Again,
it's better.
It is better.
No, it's beta.
Oh,
so
beta.
It's
Beta.
not working.
Yeah. But in his test code, it did check to see if it was active. So it won't break your deployment, but you have to have that line in there. Otherwise, it will break your deployment. So, but again, it's not necessarily about how do we do the errors, that we have to think and prepare and have a plan for them, right? Yes. So, because I think, especially coming from a background of I knew nothing, never once in technology, knew nothing about code or deployments or any of that stuff. I started to learn flow through Trailhead. I love Trailhead. I have over 1,400 badges. But what Trailhead does not teach you is how to think about what they don't write down, right? So Drew and I really have started to see, especially as Salesforce they've taken away our workflow rules now, right? They're starting to move towards flow. And if there's flow's extremely powerful, it can break your system if you're not careful. And I think that's the message that we're trying to get out there, is that you have to think about what it's doing before you turn it on, right? So on Twitter, all over the place, I see lots of flows that are like ginormous. They do 5 million things, but there's not one single way to handle if something goes wrong within the flow, right? So that's really what we're truly asking is, all right, let's stop and think. What do you do when things go wrong? So, any other questions, comments? Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, so about the part of not changing the flow directly in production.
Yeah, no.
So I was working on a project with a client, and I had to integrate a flow in an external website. And then when the external website creates a record, it sends push notification to the user. So once I pushed the flow to production, it was working perfectly fine, but I had to deactivate the user. And the user was in the recipient of the push notification inside of the flow. And once I deactivated the user, it made my whole flow crash.
Yes.
So should I always go back to the sandbox and modify the flow in there, even if it's just something as simple as removing a user from push notification and then pushing it back?
Yes. and yes, and I would absolutely say, please avoid at all costs hard coding anything into a flow.
I found another one.
Yep.
To use the groups for the
Either a group, a custom metadata record, something else that you can adjust outside of the automation itself. So either when you move it from, like, say for example, I hard coded an org ID in a sandbox, it won't work when it gets to production. But if I used either a lookup variable or a custom metadata record, I could use that and feel safe about it. But I would absolutely say no. No changes to automation in production. I wish that Salesforce wouldn't let you do it. Right? They don't let you change Apex directly in production. Flow is Apex, right? It's just with a user interface on top. So, yeah, sandbox, 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 and more sandboxes.
And what do you think is the best way to integrate a script flow on an external website?
Ooh, too many choices, lots of variables. Let's talk about that later. Yep. Right though? Too many choices. We can talk about it, but there's lots of variables that would go into my decision making. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, hello.
Do you know if there is a good way to handle the validation rules?
I wish. Right? I probably should have mentioned that I am a Salesforce MVP and I am under NDA to some information that may make that much easier coming soon.
What were you talking about?
What? I don't know.
No,
Exactly. Right now,
Me too, I guess I missed that one.
no. It's just, it happens to be that I was in a couple meetings. Yep. You didn't hear me say that. What? It's.
But it's recorded.
But no, right now, I don't have a great plan for that, right? Other than, for me, I need to make sure I'm understanding the objects that I'm working with. I want to make sure I know what the validation rules are and plan for those in my flow. Right now, it's a little bit more manual, but we're getting there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that's also why test as another user. Yeah. Anything else? No? What time is it? Oh, I got 7 minutes left. See, I talked too fast. See, lights out. Here we go. Yeah. No? So how many of you plan for, all right, number one. How many of you use flows?
Everybody.
What? There are some people that are hardcore developers that just never.
Yeah, and still use flows.
Yeah, some like are like.
So I have a client right now who they live in old workflow rules and crazy Apex code.
Yep.
They are very, very ingrained within Salesforce, but they have a whole DevOps platform, which just had to learn the whole process for that for the marketing team. But they're very, very particular about they don't ever approve flows. They don't want flows in their org because with their org being tens of millions of records, being so huge, they don't want to. They know there's going to be errors consistently. The only flows that they use are ones that I've created around the campaign object because it's not really being used by departments outside of enterprise. And so I'm curious if you've also seen situations where there are orgs who are just dead set against flow and how to get them into the 2020s of flows.
Yeah.
Are there any arguments?
They're
Arguments? Except no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, their piece is the flow notification, the error notifications get logged to a specific sales dev and dev team, and every single flow they've created is going to have some error due to permission issues.
Interesting. So maybe one of the arguments you could tell them that on single record operation, flow outperforms Apex.
Right.
Full stop.
Gotcha. because they do Apex code, they do it for everything. So they basically take so there have been 3 instances where I built a flow, it works in the sandbox, everything's good to go, and they come back and say, I prefer we build this in Apex. And so now my project time frame gets delayed about 3.5 to 4 weeks because a coder comes in and has to rebuild it in Apex.
Well, very well might. Maybe.
Time to value.
Yes, exactly. Time to value. Fine. Okay, you have a very complicated org. That means you have to pay more for us to do anything in it. Right? Especially when it comes to dealing with legacy stuff.
We've absolutely had to push back and be like, your project's going to be delayed because I don't have they're not giving me permissions to like write code. I can build flows all day long, but inevitably the project leaders are coming back to me.
I would ask them for the developers. Why aren't they giving you the support you need? Are they doing what kind of testing are they doing for their Apex?
It's just bureaucracy at the end of the day of why they're not. However, I'm curious if you run into a situation where there's just like a lot of red tape.
Yes,
and
I think the documentation is the best approach. Documentation and saying, because you have this, there's a really good tool right now called Hubble, Hubbl, from Uncommon Purpose, right? This is more of like that time to value conversation. They are an org comparison tool or an org documentation tool, excuse me. An org documentation tool, but one of their key things is that every time they run their documentation tool, they're tracking that. So you could say to your new customer, you run the tool. The word is escaping me at the moment, but you can say, the amount of automation you have in your org is 75% more complex than the average Salesforce org. Therefore, it's going to take me longer to deal with it because you have so much code-based customization.
We've already kind of run into that a little bit where we've noticed more and more kind of as the process has evolved, the Apex hasn't been updated because it's 2 years old and things evolve. And I'm having to go in and figure out like, well, is the workflow rule broken? No. Is it the Apex code? Well, no one remembers how to build that Apex code because it was built from 3 developers ago and no one who built that code is here anymore.
Yep.
So I'm curious to know what's their acronyms for because basically it's the same thing that you do in Apex and it flows. If the flow is going to crash, then the code is going to crash.
Yeah. It depends on how well the code's built too. Like if it's crappy code, it's crappy code and it's gonna.
Try and catch blocks, we can do the same thing.
Right.
So if we build the try and catch for right in code, we can build them in flows.
Yeah.
The people who are rewriting the flows know the code really, really well. To have to translate that into flow and update the flow. Ultimately, we give them a flow and they say, what's your end goal? And then they sit down and write the code. They're not going into the flow we've built and updating it to make it more enhanced. They're saying, what's your end problem? Okay, let's code this out. And they go straight to the code. So it's, like I said, a lot of bureaucracy, but I like the idea of like reviewing the documentation, understanding like your org is significantly more complex than any other org out there. Or many.
Yeah, or when was the last time that they tech debt? Like, how old is this code?
1823.
Yeah, right? Like, no, but true.
Very true.
Right, so anything, especially, it's those hard conversations of Salesforce is a moving target. It's never going to be the same. You have to make choices using the best information, but those choices need to also change and adapt as the technology changes, the business requirements change. Like you can't buy it once and leave it alone and expect it to work, but fun. Yeah, thank you. I've had a glorious time in this country. Sorry. Woo. Can't believe I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.